Hello and welcome to Jessie James Beads. How are you this fine spring day? I say spring day, it's not exactly toasty, but at least the sun shone for a hot minute there. My name is Jem, I'm broadcasting to you from the United Kingdom for Jessie James Beads, and we're going to have some fun today with mystery grab bags from Dakota Stones at Jessie James Beads. I'm also going to be throwing in some beads by the dozen. Now, dependent on what colour choices you go for, depends on which of those beads you want to use. But I have gone for the most beautiful glowing. They're called Emerald Orbs. I mean, I just love the name. Nothing else matters. I just love the name. So how are you today? I want to show you on the board what everything looks like that we're going to use and work towards tonight, whilst I check to see if the internet is indeed doing what it ought to be doing, because sometimes it's a little bit naughty and simply doesn't. So I hope that you are well, and I hope that you're having a great day. Do tell me what you've been up to. Let's have a look then. Okay, Melanie is here. Hello, sweet pea. Good to see you. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I can't actually see the live comments at the moment, so that's going to be an interesting one. Any questions that come up throughout today's show, I'll simply have to address them in a minute because they're just not coming up. So I can see that you are there. Welcome. Have yourself a lovely day. Let's get cracking, shall we? So just to recap, I've got a beautiful mystery grab bag. Dakota Stones here at Jessie James Beads. And I'll show you what we're going to work with in a second. But it's a reasonably large slab bead. And as long as you've got a reasonably large bead, the design is going to work. I also added in some beads by the dozen in Emerald Orbs, which I think is just the most fun and beautiful name. Brilliant. I can see some of you there. I can't see all of the comments though. So hello. I hope you're okay. Lots and lots of love to you from cold but sunny Oxfordshire in the very middle of England. Let's head back down to the board and take a look at what I'm going to be working with today. Here we are. So this is what I wanted to make with you. It's a variation on a bar necklace with just a little bit extra. Now, I really enjoy pieces like this, and I'm going to show you my top tip for making bar necklaces. Top tip for making bar necklaces is to have a whole ton of these gorgeous chain reaction chains with little clasps on the end. Now, I've added one with an amethyst colour faceted glass. And on the action end, I've put a couple of very simple lobster clasps. And I've got a stash of these in different colourways. And I've got a really fancy clasp round at the back. And I have some of these set to one side, along with a whole bunch of bar necklace components. So it's really cool if you want to mix and match. Some days you might want to go mixed metals. So I've got silver colour metal here with those almost smoky amethyst coloured beads. And I'm adding that to a copper colour craft wire. So if you continue to just add in those little clasps down at the bottom, then you'll be able to mix and match and add in whatever colour you're feeling that day. Now, I'm terribly sorry that I can't see the comments coming through at the moment. Facey is being a bit of a facey. Let's talk wire, shall we? So I'm using some craft wire today in a non-tarnish copper colourway. I'm going to start with a good length of around about 12 inches. Now, dependent on the drill hole size you get in your largest bead, now this is a faceted slab, this could be agate or it could be onyx. Very difficult for me to know which way it is. To me, it looks like a banded onyx, but there are a couple of possibilities, so I can't claim to know exactly what it is. It's a beautiful, though. I do love being able to see the rough edges from how gemstones form in nature. Gorgeous big slab of faceted gemmy goodness. Really huge drill hole actually in this piece. So if you wanted to start with a 16 gauge wire, as long as it goes through your drill hole, you absolutely can. I'm going to be working with 18 gauge because it's much more likely that all of the drill holes will be accepting to 18 gauge. So the first piece of wire that we're going to work with is around about 10 to 12 inches in length, and I'm just going to sit my big slab of gemmy goodness right there in the middle. I'm going to show you the other beads that I got in my Dakota Stones grab bag before I clear them off the board. And I'm also going to show you the beads by the dozen that I chose to work with. So let's pop that little fella up in the corner where it goes to slightly squishy blurry vision. The beads I'm going to work with from the grab bag, I've got a couple of faceted what looks for all the world like Amazonite, but it looks like Amazonite that has been on steroids. It's absolutely glorious. I feel that has got an AB coating because I see a beautiful pink to purple colour shift reflective surface, which is not something that happens on Amazonite very often. So let's pop those two down. We're going to be using those two. I'm also going to be using this mystical green. I imagine it could be a jasper. Couldn't tell you exactly what it is. That's the joy of a grab bag. It's always a mystery. We're going to use one of those in a little while though. The remainder of the stones I got in my grab bag, which is this gorgeous colourway, are fabulous, each and every one. So I've got some greeny coloured hues in these gorgeous, they're more rectangular than perfect cubes, they're fabulous, so I've got a pair of those. I also got two gorgeous faceted gems, not quite a bicone, but really, really lovely. I can't wait to work with those. I had some smaller gems which look again a little bit like a jasper. Could be a bloodstone, it's the right kind of colour. And then I have got something that looks for all the world like a wood jasper. Really beautiful collection of mystery stones. Now I would surmise that this is indeed precious, beautiful peridot. Some very natural chunks, very sizeable actually. If you ever see little black dots in your peridot, it's carbon. Peridot comes from the same place that diamonds come from. So if you find any little tiny black dots in your peridot, it's little tiny baby immature diamonds. I've got these two huge drill hole spacers, again in a lovely green mottled tone. I've got one of these, which matches the one that I put in there earlier in the slightly more wood tone. It's got a really dry, powdery texture to it, but it's cold to the touch. So it's a gemstone. I imagine it's a jasper, couldn't guarantee you. I've got another couple of these mottled gems, which are really, really glorious. Looks like a spotted jade or a spotted jasper. And then I have two of these very, very cool beads. Now I don't know what the material is at all, but they've got this like a painted effect on them. Fabulous. So that was the one that I received, my Dakota Stones grab bag, a mystery grab bag. And then we have got the, and I'm going to say the name again because honestly, Emerald Orbs is just the best name for a beads by the dozen bunch. Again, I can only apologise, I can't see and respond to your comments at the moment. I will endeavour to look over them later on this evening and catch up with any questions if you have any. But welcome, welcome, welcome to Jessie James Beads. That's where we are right now. So you get, obviously, you're buying by the dozen, so we've had 12. I've got 6 remaining, and I popped 6 onto my design up here. And I also reserved from my Dakota Stones grab bag 2 smaller stones and 1 larger stone. Let's just bring that down ever so slightly. So again, 10 to 12 inches. Again, it's 18 gauge. However, for this part, if you wanted to use 16 gauge for a really strong design, you absolutely can. Now what you may notice, the piece I have here is a very unusual shape, and I love that in gemstones because sometimes your gem cutter will cut not to maximise the carat weight of your gemstone, but to maximise the beauty of the cutting. And they have done that here because they've got the lovely banding moving around this side of the gemstone. So it's really, really gorgeous, but it doesn't matter that your gemstone isn't a perfectly formed geometric shape. I'm very happy that that's an unusual one. This one is more of a classic slab, so it's an off oval in that potentially banded onyx or agate. So I've sat that centrally at the very middle of my, let's say 10 to 12 inches of that wire, and I'm working again with 18 gauge, and I'm going to pop a right angle bend on either side, and I'm going to leave myself a gap between the stone and where I pop the bend. And let's do that on the other side as well. It doesn't need to be a massive gap, but a gap nonetheless. I want to be able to have my stone moving around freely. So if I just pop that down for a second, you can see there's a bit of gap on either side there, and I'm now going to create quite large round forms on either end. So all we're doing is a wrapped loop at either end, and what you are creating at this stage, I suppose, is a very large rosary link all by itself. So let's grab those round nose pliers and create the round form. As usual, I will start by creating half a round form shape. Check it out, make sure that it's centralised on that central core wire. The core wire is the one that goes through the middle of the bead. Bring that set of pliers back in and draw the wire all the way around. Now what I tend to do when I'm trying to create something that's equal and opposite is before I start wrapping my wire, I will get the loop done on the other end as well, and I will try to make all of my movements as equal and opposite to each other to encourage that sense of symmetry, appreciating that there's not symmetry on that central stone. There we go. Let's just put a little bit more warmth into the wire. What I would say is you can always try to get yourself some raw copper. A raw copper wire is really, really soft. Today I'm working with a non-tarnish copper colour, copper core wire, which is a craft wire. The German style will work very similarly, but as a preference at home I love to work with raw copper because it's just beautiful and soft and fluid and easy to use. So I'm going to take my time to make sure that the loops on either end of my, let's call it a big old rosary link for the time being, I want those loops to be as similar as possible because they form part of the design. It's not just functional. So this one's ever so slightly larger. If that happens to you, you can pop those pliers in and just rotate it around ever so slightly to tighten that up. And then I'm going to wrap around that core wire with the tail coming away like so. Now I've left quite a long tail here. There's far more wire than I actually need, but I'd always rather have too much wire than too little wire. So I'm just going to push that all the way around, naturally enough, catching on everything as we go. And I'm going to go for a couple of wraps first, trying to keep that as nice and tight and smooth. Now if you ever get a little gap in your wrapping, stop for a moment, tighten that little coil of wire up, and then you'll be able to prevent that gapping from getting worse. So I've done 2.5 turns around the core wire on this end. So what we're going to do is swap and do the same on the other side, always being conscious to keep those loops as similar as possible. So let's draw the tail all the way around and try to get to the same kind of position. So what I want to do is, it's going to act a little bit like an ancient, well, not that ancient, a Victorian fob design. And they often had a little bit of a spinning motion to them. So what I don't want to do is wrap too tightly against that central slab gemstone. So I'm going to go for one more half wrap on this side, so draw it all the way across. If I flip the design around slowly, we're going to do exactly the same thing on the other end. And the reason I do this little by little is because I want to have the same number of wraps on either side. Now for this piece I did in fact use a raw copper in 16 gauge, purely because I could. The drill hole aperture was huge, frankly. But this is what I mean about spinning. Gives you something to fidget with if you're nervous or you feel like you need to burn off some energy while you're waiting for something to happen. I don't know why the Victorians had fobs, but for me, I like to have jewellery that I can move around. So I'm going to leave my wrapping on the core wire at this kind of level. Or what I might do actually is just see if I can get another half wrap on either end and still be able to move that gemstone around. So I'm just swapping from one side to the other and making small movements, making sure that my wraps are nice and tight. Let's have a look. Yep, I can still spin just here. So what we need to do now is trim away that excess wire.
Now we're going to keep a hold of these pieces because they will become very useful later on. Let's get the flush side of those cutters. Look twice before you press cut. It saves you lots of heartache and wasted wire if you do. So we're going to get this tiny little sticky uppy end bit just here, and we're going to give it a squish. And the wire is coming over the front of the core and off to the right. So that's the direction I'm going to move my pliers in. What this action does is just smooths that end section down and gives it much less cause to catch on anything. We'll do the same at the other end, just holding it in as best a position as I possibly can for you to see. Squishy, squishy. There we go. So we've got our central fob. And if that's all you wanted to do, you can absolutely come in with your chain reaction. And as I mentioned at the head of the show, I have got loads of these in different colourways. This is a silvery toned one with those smoky amethyst toned rondelles. And you can just add on your little clasps at any time, and you've already got a fidget pendant to play with. But if you want to go the extra mile and add a little bit more, then I'm going to show you how to add a little bit more. We're going to use those beads by the dozen. Now I went for Emerald Orbs, and it's not just because I like saying Emerald Orbs, although I have decided that I do. More 18 gauge wire. This is around about 8 to 9 inches, which is again more than plenty. But again, I'd always rather have too much than too little. So I'm going to smooth that really strongly between thumb and forefinger. If you're just joining us now, unfortunately I'm unable to see the live comments. So welcome, welcome. I hope you are well. I hope you've had a lovely day thus far. And I hope that you enjoyed today's tutorial. So what we're going to do now is very, very gently cause a curve to sit down beneath that central slab. Now, if you have an unequal slab, make sure the largest piece is facing down when you make this smiley shaped section so that it allows the piece to spin. If you create with the smaller side down, what you may find is you haven't left enough space for the larger side to spin around. The piece I'm working with here is pretty similar, so I don't think there's going to be a huge problem, but I still will make sure I accommodate and allow that to spin fully in its finished situation. So let's get a lovely curve going. Now I am fortunate enough to have a little round form, a little wooden round form. This is a bangle form, and it's a great place to start. However, pot of hairspray, lotion, I don't know quite what you have around, shampoo even, something that's a similar size, and I've warmed that wire through just to give me a bit of a horseshoe shape, and it may not be the right dimension, but what we're going to do is have a look at that and see how it fits. So that's just slightly larger than we need, but that's fine, because if you put too much of a thin little tiny arc down at the bottom, you'll struggle to get all of your beads on. So the drill apertures in these gorgeous, I'm going to say it again, Emerald Orbs. I love that name. Whoever named that, gold star please. And I'm just going to put all 6 of these into position. Now you may need less, you may need more. I chose to use 6 so I could make a piece to show you before the show, and also to allow me to make 2 pieces in the same colourway. So once I have got my beads into position, at the centre bottom of that horseshoe, I'm just going to very gently close that up, not putting any pressure on those beads, it's just a very, very small movement. What I'm going to do now is decide which of the faces of the wire work is neatest. So I think they actually both look pretty neat, but if I had to choose, this would be the front for the wire for me, because the cut side is at the back of the design, okay? The gem itself will spin. If you don't want it to spin, you can simply take that wire wrapping just a little bit further up, but I want my gem to be able to spin. What I'm looking for is the neatest possible aspect to see from the front there without any sort of wire end parts. So let's just have a look at how this is going to sit. I've chosen to use far too much wire, but that's fine because we're going to use those tails, those little residues, and get that sitting on the front face. I think I've spun that around. I have. Let's put that back down for a second. Doesn't really matter at the end of the day. They're both pretty neat. And what I'm looking to do now is close that little horseshoe shape up so that this section of wire, where it comes away from the beads, is going to sit very, very close to those two loops. So I'm just going to tighten it slightly by just very gently pulling that in, making sure that there's going to be enough room for my bead to spin, and that's where our extra little beads come in. So I have gone for these, wow, supercharged, I think it's Amazonite, I couldn't say for sure, it does look like a coated Amazonite to me, and just choosing something that's a little bit smaller, a little bit narrower, gives me the opportunity to get quite close to those two loops on the main section of our pendant. Let's get that into the best light. So obviously the beads are going to spin around, and what we're going to do next is create small loops on either side of the wire to add into these large hoop shapes on either side of our feature gemstone. So what we do want is to make sure that this is as symmetrical as possible. What we don't want is to make it so that it's so squashed up that I can't very, very gently make a little bit of space to add a drop of bead later. Now, if you feel that you can't allow a little bit of space whilst you're doing this next step, what I might do is show you how to add the charm in, and then you don't have to worry about it. So you can do this in really whatever order you fancy, but let's use one of those offcuts. First things first, let's make a nice neat end. We're going to make a little charm now. If you're just joining the live, welcome to Jessie James Beads. I'm Gem Hawks, and I'm creating today with a Dakota Stones mystery grab bag. Creating a circular form now just on the end of this piece of scrap wire. This was an offcut from where we created our main feature pendant section. Now that I've got that little round part started, I'm going to push that very, very gently round and around until I have two circuits of wire, like so. So it's gone around one time and a second time. I might take that slightly further. You could go for 3 wraps of wire if you prefer. We're using scrap wire right now. So I'm going to flip that to the other hand, grip from underneath with my bent chain nose pliers, and just pull that disc away so that that little flat coil disc we've made sits at the bottom of what in a moment will be a straight line. As I said, this is a bit of scrap wire, so I just needed to straighten that up. And then we're going to add our little charm bead on. Now, if you find that your chosen bead doesn't go onto your 18 gauge wire, you've got lots of other beads to choose from. Just pick another one instead. What we're going to do now is to create an open and closable or simple loop. We're going to add this onto the design. So I'm not going to create the bend right on top of the bead. Normally I would say let's get that nice and tight. We're going to leave a tiny gap so that as we bend the wire, there's no stress on that gemstone. Nobody loves a fractured gemstone. I've got to show you a story. Fractured gemstones. This came through in the post a little while ago, and it is the most beautiful labradorite that I'd bought. I can't find the other half of it now. Look at how gorgeous that is, and look at how smashed it is. So what we're looking to do is avoid smashing gemstones by being respectful with our wire shenanigans. So let's grab those round nose pliers and rotate them around. So I've got the first half of that loop exactly the same way as we did the loops up at the top here on either side. And I'm going to draw the wire across, and instead of wrapping a complete wrapped loop, what we're going to do is I'm just going to grip that and make sure it's sitting exactly where I want it to, at the top of that core wire, scooch that little bead down out of the way, and then I'm going to trim where that curved section crosses the first angle. Let me just show you that a little bit more closely. We cut just as that tail wire meets this angle. So let's pop that in the scrap pot, and we're going to finish that loop, put it into position so it makes a closed loop. I'm going to squish a couple of times with my pliers, and then I'm going to open it like a jump ring, so I'm only opening half of that loop up, and then what I want to do is to sit that in the centre of my half a dozen beads, like so. So you may feel more comfortable doing this after you've created the pendant, but if you're worried that you're going to make this section a little bit tight, this is another way for you to accommodate that. So let's close that bead up. Of course, the other thing you can do, which is a much simpler way, is to make your charm first and then just thread it on when you're threading on those beads by the dozen. One of the reasons I like a design like this is that I can, at a later date, remove this bead and add any bead on that I choose. I love having jewellery that's interchangeable. So we've got now a basic shape, and all we have to do now is just attach these two sections back together. So let's ensure that our little section of beads are sitting down in the centre of the horseshoe shape. And again, a little bit of space above that gorgeous coated, I want to say, Amazonite. Pull that wire forwards. In order to not lose that horseshoe shape, I'm just going to twist the section around, and again, leaving a little bit of a gap, pull the wire forwards here, and this will enable me to just sit everything together one more time before I make the last two simple loops. And the last two simple loops we're going to create in exactly the same way as we did with the little green dropper bead down at the bottom. Now you might see that one of my wires has come off at a funny angle, so I just need to straighten that up. They need to be coming up basically in a straight line from the board. So if I just tip this backwards, you'll see that it's gone off at a bit of a tangent, but we're going to fix that anyway. So a tiny bit of warmth in, tiny bit of warmth in, and what I might do to make it easier for you to see what's happening, I'm going to trim this to around about 1/2 inch. Now that's more wire than we need, but it might just make it easier for you to see exactly how everything is happening. Let's just bring my focal back into position. So what we're going to do is just draw that wire around in a circular form. So we've got that first half of the loop shape created. Just move that over. I've done that really wrong-handed. And then we're just going to take that tail all the way around until we get it crossing over at the point where you've got that first angle. So again, we're going to trim that last little bit of wire away. Let's pop that in the melt pot. I had a question on my YouTube channel the other day. I talk a lot about my melt pot. Here's today's melt pot. Bits of scrap copper. Now I keep one for copper, one for coated wire, and one for precious metals. And at a later date I will pop them into a crucible with a bit of flux and melt them down. Will I ever demonstrate this to you? Absolutely not. There's as much chance of me demonstrating that to you as there is of me demonstrating with super glue, because the results will end up with me hopping off to A&E. A&E is the same thing as ER, because although I do melt my own metal at home, I would never be the tutor to share that technique with you. I'm simply not good enough. So I'm just going to rejig that horseshoe shape until it sits exactly where I want it to. That's starting to look pretty good to me. So back to those round nose pliers. Pop that one up and out of the way. And I'm going to rotate around. Now if you want to rotate around all in one go, as you get more practiced with wire, you absolutely can. So let me show you. You can just keep going all the way around. What can happen is that you bend the wire, especially if you're newer to wire working. So do feel free to always take your time. I've been working with wire for about 9 years now, and I still make mistakes. And I still bend the wire when I don't want to bend it, so I will often use the two-stage technique, even after lots of practice. So let's just trim this wire away, look twice, cut once in the right place, spinning around for you there like Kylie Minogue. Let's make sure that that loop is closed up. And what we're looking for is for the cut end of wire to transect where that little angle change takes place. And what I'm going to do now is strengthen the loops on either end of the drop down section, and then we're going to look at the angles on those loops. Now it probably has spun around again. That looks like the neat side. It's all good. It's all good. It doesn't really matter if it goes on the other way up. So what you can see is that my loops on the lower section are a little bit too far apart. I want them to sit here and here, midpoint at the bottom of those loops. So what we need to do is just bring those loops up very gently, and it's a very subtle movement. What I'm doing is just a very, very gentle tweak of the wrist, and hopefully it will start coming together. I would rather do 2 or 3 tweaks with the wrist than I would do one and have it faulty or break or bend it horribly out of shape. So I would always rather take my time than overstress things. So the last part of today's tutorial, I'm quite happy with how those loops are now placed. I'm going to open those loops in the same way as I did before. I'm going to open the first one rather in the same way as I did before, like a jump ring. So you actually only open half of it. Pop that in the front of the design. It's twisted around now. I no longer remember which way was the preferred way. Doesn't matter. Sit that into position. Now when I come to stick that second loop onto the second loop, if that all makes sense, I do hope so, what you may find is it's a little bit tricky to do that super easy and very, very comfortable way where we open like a jump ring, so one half comes up and one half stays still. Now normally I would say never ever open a jump ring or a simple loop in the way I'm about to show you. The reason I'm doing it like this, if I can get that to twist around, is to retain the integrity of the rest of the wire in the design. So I'm going to very, very gently open the loop out like a walking stick, like a cane top, and slide that through. And it's literally the only time I will ever do that. And then we're just going to close that up carefully. Once it's closed back up into position, I'm going to give that a really good strengthen, and that's munching with the flat sides of my bent chain nose pliers. Again, if you are just joining us on the live, I'm afraid I can't see live comments today, but I will check back and see if there are any questions a little bit later on. So there is the piece that we're working on with those beautiful mystery stones from Dakota Stones, courtesy of Jessie James Beads. So I've got my 2 different designs. I've added in beads by the dozen in Emerald Orbs, and I've also got this section of chain reaction with some little clasps on the end. So let's just put that together. One clasp through there, one clasp through here, and I did pop a link in the video description to the offers that we have currently for chain reaction bundles. There's gold, there's silver colours, there's mixed, a bit of both. I do love a good chain reaction. I've got dozens of these made up as necklace backs, and you can add them to any of your bar necklaces. So I'm just going to show you my chain reaction setup. All I've done, apart from move the board, is cut my chain reaction approximately in half. I have used split rings, which I got from 1 or 2 chain reaction chains, and attached a couple of very, very simple lobster or parrot clasps down at the bottom. And then at the back of the design, I've used, I've actually got a jump ring on one side and a split ring on the other side, and a gorgeous fancy clasp. Now the reason for having lots of different chain reactions with lots of different colourways is you can swap and change about. Maybe you want to have a copper toned pendant because it goes with what you're wearing, but perhaps you've got a silver scarf and you want to match the silver metalwork. I'm a huge proponent of mixing metals. There is no hard and fast rule. If you like it, that is the way forwards, and I hope that you enjoy creating with Jessie James Beads with these gorgeous Dakota Stones mystery grab bags with our beautiful chain reaction, not to mention having fun with wire, gemstone and beads. Let me just show you that I am indeed still here. Hello, it's still me. I've been talking at you for ages now. My name is Jem. I'm broadcasting to you from the United Kingdom. I haven't been able to see any of your live comments today, I'm afraid. Facey's being a bit of a nuisance today, but we are here and we are live broadcasting this class to you. I hope that you have enjoyed today's features, today's class and today's techniques, and I hope that you will also have a look at grabbing some of those mystery Dakota Stones grab bags, because to be inspired by the gemstones that you receive is just a thing of wonder. And if you haven't got slabs, the same design will work with rounds, especially if you get some quite chunky ones. Oftentimes in the grab bags you get quite funny designs, quite funky gemstones, quite funky shapes. I really enjoyed finding those slabs in my
my grab bag. So let me know what you make. Don't forget to hashtag us on social media. With, I guess, hashtag JJB, hashtag Jessie James Beads. I'm sure one of the gorgeous folks that works in the office at Jessie James will enlighten you, but don't forget to encourage us with your makes on social media. I am going to love you and leave you for now, and I'll be back in a couple of weeks with, I don't know what just yet. It's a surprise. Maybe it will be the magical mystery bead box. Who knows? You guys take care. Mwah! Lots and lots of love, and I will see you again very, very soon. Bye for now.